Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the wonderful Jenny Mercer. Such a privilege to have the opportunity to talk to Jenny about her research into stress and doctoral students. And not only does she share some really interesting contextual information, she also offers some very practical tips if you are finding your PhD journey overwhelming right now. So I do hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Emma.
Right, we've just been discussing how fantastically technical we both are, but here we are in the land of Zoom. Thank you so much for being here and for taking time. It's a really busy time for everybody, I know, in term time, and I really do appreciate you taking time out.
Very welcome.
I was trying to remember how I found you. We were just talking about that as well before we started, and because your work is so fantastic, and I was so excited to find someone working in applied psychology and thinking particularly around stress, and then we're talking particularly around stress and how it applies to doctoral students. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, I always start with asking people about their own experience of graduate study and how they got to where they are now. So would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Certainly. So I completed my own doctorate in, I'm looking to the shelf now to see, 2004.
Amazing.
But one of the threads of my research since then and for that has always been experiential research about student experience. So when I went to HE, very often I was based on the different roles I found myself in. I found myself undertaking research with those particular cohorts. So, for instance, I've got publication on students with mood disorders. I was the Erasmus coordinator for a while, so I've got one about Erasmus students. My own PhD was actually on access students. I used to be a lecturer of access students and how they return to education, their sense of self. And I think as an educator, such experiential research is really helpful to understand where those cohorts are coming from, and also to enhance your own practice and in working with such students. I now find myself a number of years later as the Graduate Studies Co-ordinator for Health Sciences in Cardiff Metropolitan University. So I oversee the candidature of doctoral students right through from application through to vivas, oversee their journeys, supervisory teams, train supervisors, that sort of thing. And I'm also experienced supervisor of doctoral students, and I examine and chair vivas. So really, in terms of doctoral students, most of my working week revolves in some way around doctoral education. And I'm also currently leading a Doctoral Wellbeing Initiative for the university.
Amazing. And I love this idea of this kind of this leading with experience and this experiential research. And I think what comes through in the work that I've read of yours is this kind of this curiosity, this interest, this desire to know more about how things are for people.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit then about your research into stress?
Yes, sure. So the particular research that led you to contact me actually started at every year I lead a conference for our doctoral students. And I'd employed a keynote speaker one year to talk about stress and resilience in doctoral students. And he was very keen to make that bespoke to the specific audience. So rather than just stand there and have some slides and talk about theories, he wanted to be able to populate those with examples from our own audience and to get a sense of what their experiences were. So before that, then we got ethical approval to actually collect a little bit of data from some of the students, and that's where the research started and has evolved since then. So their responses were, as you can imagine, very useful for the session, but they're also really illuminating in terms of the range of stressors that doctoral students identified, how they cope with them, and actually in some situations how they didn't cope. So if I tell you a little bit more about the actual questions we asked and some of the findings, and then that will hopefully enlighten you all a little bit more.
Brilliant.
So
thank you.
It was an online survey, largely taking a qualitative approach. We asked, first of all, participants to define stress. So by completing the sentence, in relation to my doctoral study stresses, because we're very aware stress is this huge area. So we wanted them to sort of think about how, as a doctoral student, what were the stresses there? Then, having thought about that, it developed by asking them to list their 4 main stresses and to briefly explain why they find them stressful, and then what they do when they are in that situation. Because again, what we were interested in was not just, although it is very important to identify what the stresses are, but to get some insight into, well, what are people doing when they're in that situation? Because in terms of applying findings like this, as a university, perhaps training supervisors, talking to students, offering interventions, it's not just what's going on, but how individuals are dealing with that when they find themselves in those situations. So if I talk to you, I realise we're strapped for time rather. So if I just talk to you two of the key areas, really, I think. So first of all, the sources of stress were quite varied. They included time-related stressors, keeping focused and progressing. I mean, the doctoral journey, it's an unusual one, isn't it? It's different from any other higher education course. It can feel at times quite structureless.
Absolutely. And I think that's what that really floors a lot of people.
Definitely. Yeah. And whilst autonomy is great, the backlash of it can be you're left swimming thinking, well, what do I do now? And is this okay? Is this not? And often as well, doctoral students they're isolated in the way that the study they're doing, they're the only person doing that particular study, and that can feel quite lonely at times. Although also, of course, it's exciting and amazing, and you're making a great contribution. So these sort of things are identified. The juggling of roles as well, work and family. Some of our students were academic staff as well, who are contracted to undertake doctorates. So they have some specific stresses in trying to juggle their academic job and family. And I think that the juggling of roles is likely to be particularly pertinent at the moment, isn't it? As we find ourselves in the UK all in lockdown again. Yes,
I'm hoping nobody's going to come and knock on the door and say, "Mum," while we're recording this.
Sure. Yeah. So trying to manage all these different things at the moment is potentially even more a source of stress, isn't it? And another common stressor was this idea of an imposter syndrome, doubting of self and ability. Doing a doctorate, you're doing the highest qualification in academia, and that's great and that's amazing. But it's amazing also how many students start and think, "Oh my gosh, am I good enough for this?" And doctoral students tend to be perfectionists, don't they? And that again can be self-debilitating sometimes. Particularly, again, I talked earlier about some of the can feel structureless, but I think sometimes it's perfectionism. Another sort of difference of a doctoral program is you might give in a piece of work to your supervisors, and it won't be. There is no perfect, but it certainly won't be perfect early on, and PhDs and doctorates evolve. But that again is an odd thing at the beginning, and so there's all those sort of doubts and imposter syndromes. There was nuances of specific academic tasks as well, certain phases and stages, not sure perhaps how to do a literature review, struggling with stats. So all these things happen at different stages and phases. And in some cases, although I would say that this wasn't the most common thing, but in some cases, supervisory relationships can cause stress.
Yes.
So we had, ideas then about what could be stressful. But what we wanted to do, as I said, is to look at what people would do. How did they cope with that? What were they doing when they found themselves in those situations? And psychologists have proposed a variety of coping taxonomies with many different categories. Some have 2, some have 6. But I wanted some sort of framework that I could put these findings into. And the most basic distinction when looking at this sort of thing is between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping. So problem-focused would include sort of active coping strategies, like things like instrumental support, planning, that sort of thing. So to give you some examples of what the participants said about in that study, who I categorise as being in the problem-focused group. One said, I deal with it, problem solving, my supervisors help whenever they can. Another used a strategy to sort of refocus when feeling stressed. So that person said, take on tasks considered not challenging or demanding and gain some sort of motivation from that achievement and push on. So you can see there that those are likely to be quite helpful strategies to adopt when feeling overwhelmed and stressed with the tasks you have to do. Emotion focus, meanwhile, examples there would be perhaps denial of what's happening, could be substance use, venting about what's happening. So again, to give some examples from the study, I make myself a cup of tea and take some time out, which is probably a good strategy, isn't
Lovely.
it? However, procrastination has become a constant battle. So then you got that, dialogue in your head and doing other things instead. I can remember, actually, you asked me to begin about my own doctorate. I remember actually cleaning my kitchen floor one day rather than writing something. And if you know about me, I am not house proud. So it really got to the depth that I was cleaning my kitchen floor. And I was, oh, what is going on here?
Yes, I hear you. Totally hear you there.
Another example is moan to my colleagues, moan to my partner, drink a glass of wine. Now, generally, and this isn't in every example, but generally, problem-focused coping is seen as a better strategy to adapt than emotion-focused. So if we just take the example I've just given you of emotion-focused, moan to my colleagues, moan to my partner. Whilst it is, of course, important to talk and good to talk, but sometimes if it gets into sort of a rant and venting and moaning, you actually can find yourself sort of back in the room of I don't know, if you moan, for instance, let's just give the example, you're moaning about a supervisory meeting and you get into that, he said this, she said this, and then I said, you can actually find yourself getting stressed again, and that actually isn't helping you at all. So the third category I then identified, and this was the one where some real red flags were people that basically it wasn't a strategy and it suggested they weren't coping. So my a nice, very succinct one, but really sums this up, was this, ask, well, what do you do when you feel like this? Hide. One word, hide. I thought, yeah.
That is honesty there. That is honesty right there.
Yeah. And again, you really sums up how certain strategies are going to be more helpful than others. Another said, work harder, fall into a weekend of exhaustion. Well, that's not a sustainable strategy, is it? You might work really hard for a certain amount of time, but that's likely to lead to a world of pain in terms of, exhaustion and possibly becoming unwell. And somebody else said, become defeatist, negative, and somewhat depressed. It's had a significant but negative impact on my mental health. So as I said, started off really as an exercise for a lecture in a workshop, then became so much more, because it was clear, gosh, there's some really fascinating stuff here. I think that the key lessons we took away was that there are many positive examples here of students engaging in really useful approaches to dealing with this stress. I think as well, going back to what we were saying earlier, Emma, about the use of experiential research, I'm a big believer that it's handy for students, actually, are useful to hear such accounts and realise that they're not alone, they're not the only ones that might struggle with these things or feel these stresses.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because I think that sense of isolation is one of the most paralyzing things. I'm all on my own, nobody else understands what this feels like.
Exactly.
And being able to connect, I think, is incredibly useful, and would really encourage people to connect, to kind of have a look at other people's experiences, find out about that, because you are not alone. You are not alone, and there are lots of people who understand that.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
What I also love about this work is that sense of first of all, that sense of really clarifying, because I think people generally go, oh, I'm really stressed, and actually it's kind of very generalized, not very useful thing, whereas you said, what are the stressors, stressors, what is going on for you, what's the thing that really pushes the button, so that people can start to identify that and go, it's that's the thing that I really need to sort of attend to. And then to acknowledge for them that everybody does have coping strategies, everybody's got them.
Absolutely.
Just you might want to tweak them up a little bit because they might not be serving you so well.
Definitely.
But everybody's got them. And I think that's the other really important thing to remember, is that you have a whole bank of coping strategies and a whole potential more. And I think what's brilliant about your research then is you're putting that out there so that people can look and go, oh, I'd like to try a bit of that, or I might have a look at that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And it was actually quite, I mean, you know how it is, by the time you come to the end of analysis of a piece of work, it all looks lovely and linear and neat. But actually,
yes, tidy it all up.
Many people's narratives were a mixture of both, emotion focused and problem focused. I'm not for a minute suggesting there's these, super people out there that only do problem focus and are sailing through, and it's very likely we're a mixture. But I do wonder if it might be useful, as an exercise for yourselves to think about, well, yes, what is it in terms of actual doctoral research that is causing these issues? But what am I doing actually? How am I reacting? Know yourself, learn about just observe a little bit. What are you doing, and what is working and what actually is becoming self-defeating, and then it might be a useful time to look at universities particularly. Actually, well-being is high on their priority, and it's quite likely that there might be some for instance, some online courses around dealing with. I know our university at the moment do a bite-sized dealing with stress, and again, something I think is the flip side of, whilst I know all this, we're looking at screens all day and it can be really frustrating, but in terms of connecting with others, going on a course like that, it's just you're part of some sort of identity, some sort of group in the university, and it just allows a little bit of interaction as well as hopefully learning something useful.
It's brilliant. And the podcast, the How to Handle the Holidays podcast we just did, gorgeous Rachel on there was talking about how when she goes on those sort of courses, it's a brilliant opportunity to make contact with other students who are interested in this area. That's something that's on their radar. She then, out of one of these groups, she set up a WhatsApp support group, and I just thought, this is stunning. So actually making contact with other people, as you say, that what a brilliant opportunity.
Definitely. And again, I don't want to keep going on about lockdown, but clearly that has challenges, and it might be that for some of you, some of your, for instance, data collection is halted. But maybe this is an opportunity to look at other skills that you could learn. I mean, I'm not suggesting this has to be, but I did a training myself and delivered the other day about presenting work, and one of the students there said, this is the first time in months I felt like a PhD student again, because he had been badgering along on his own in his room, and it just was able to do something a little bit different with his cohorts. He didn't know many people, but it just felt like a student again. And I think very often that something like that can be a huge boost.
Well, that's it. Is that kind of reflecting on what you need in the moment, and I think we talk about is that the PhD is that kind of personal development program, basically. So, and you get a kind of publication as a kind of bonus. You kind of get the thesis as a bonus, but actually it is a kind of boot camp, and that sense of reflecting on yourself, learning about yourself, understanding how you're going to meet your own needs, I think is a really important part of it. And I think that the sort of work that you're doing in terms of encouraging people to reflect on that is so useful, and just really valuable for people to kind of take that on and think about that for themselves.
I hope so, yeah.
So now, out of that gorgeous conversation, I'm going to do something kind of unfair. I do it to everybody. In terms of saying, what are your top tips or top tip for people to take away from this?
Okay. I'd like to give two, if I may.
You may.
So one is on a very individual level, and it really is, be kind to yourself, and don't feel that you're weak if you're feeling overwhelmed. It's a natural reaction. A doctorate is challenging. It's amazing. It's an opportunity you'll never have again to discover things and to read around topics. But it is challenging, and there's a lot a lot of different elements at all different phases and stages, and that in and of itself is overwhelming. So don't feel you're weak if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, and on some days not sure the direction it's going. And particularly now in lockdown, we're in an adverse situation. I mean, if the UK Health and Safety Executive defines stress as an adverse reaction to people who have excess pressures or other types of demands placed on them. And it is likely that we have all at the moment got a lot of demands pressed on them. So stress could be, the appropriate actually reaction. So be kind to yourself, and you're not weak. You're not weak. Okay, it's a normal reaction to a normal and appropriate reaction actually to an adverse situation we're in. So do that. But consider who it might be that you could speak to, that you feel is a safe environment. It might be a peer. It might be a supervisor. It might be somebody in your university, might have a graduate school. It might have somebody that oversees the sort of role I'm in. There will be people that are familiar with the type of challenges that are happening, and a conversation with them could really make the difference. So do reach out. I'm sure that people will welcome such conversations. So that's my sort of individual, personal one, if you like. Yes. My other is a very practical tip.
Love it.
Called the Eisenhower Matrix. And it is a way of organizing all these things you've got to do. You know, those when you wake up in the middle of the night and on there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's that. And it divides all your tasks into what are important and urgent and what you need to do, what you might delegate, what you can leave to another day, and the things that actually aren't important, and you might actually end up never doing them. Now, when somebody first told me about this, I thought, oh God, it's just another to-do list. I got enough to-do lists. But it really is not. It's so much more than a to-do list. The difference is you are getting everything down. Yes, you are getting all those thoughts, all those different things that are overwhelming you out of your head. You are getting them down on paper. But what you're doing is having to look at them and prioritize and order them in a way. And I am speaking from experience here. I use this now. I fortnightly update my matrix, because it helps you really work out, oh, actually, yeah, I might feel stressed. Oh my God, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. It helps me look at, okay, I have got this, and this, but actually, yeah, that there needs to be done now. Okay, when can I diarize that? That over there. I've got some things on my matrix. I'll admit, I've had them there for a year, because they're actually not that urgent, and they're things that but it helps me realize, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't something that at 4 o'clock in the morning I need to be thinking, oh my God, I've got to do that, and I haven't done that, and so I really would and I'll send a link to you, Emma.
Brilliant.
There's a link of how it works, a little 3-minute YouTube clip. There's even an app if you're that way inclined.
Amazing.
Have a go. It sounds, a doctoral student actually said to me recently, because somebody had said to them about scheduling things and writing down. I said, writing everything down stressed me out more, because I see, and that can happen. And that's why this is more than writing down. It's writing down for helping you order, process, work out which bits need doing, and that is so useful. It's productive. It's good time management, but most of all, it's calming once you've worked it all out. And schedule that into your working part of your working week. Don't do it, I'll do that ready for. No, it's part of it. It's good time management. It's a really useful strategy, and I hope you find it helpful.
This is why I love talking to psychologists, because they have loads of useful tools.
Yeah.
Make friends with psychologists, people. This is the tip for today. But that sounds brilliant, Jenny. Thank you so much. And what we will do, we always in the show notes, we have the links. So we will have the links to that. We will have the links to Jenny's research. We'll have a link of how you can get in contact with her. So please do that, and sign up to the newsletter too if you haven't already, because we always put some extra content in there every week. Thank you so much, Jenny. There's so much in there, and I know that's going to be really useful for people. Thank you for your time.
You're really welcome. I'm delighted to be asked.
And I'm wishing you well with the rest of lockdown. As you say, this is a stressful time, but wishing you well, and hope that it passes quickly for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, thank you, Jenny, and thank you for listening.